To the race for City Hall now. New York City public advocate and candidate for mayor Bill de Blasio got a boost today from a somewhat surprising source. Liberal philanthropist and businessman George Soros, the billionaire known for his efforts to promote democratization in post-Soviet states through the Open Society Foundations, among other things, guys. He cited a variety of reasons for supporting de Blasio, everything from de Blasio's support for universal pre-K to his opposition to stop and frisk. Soros lives in Westchester County, where he is registered to vote. First question, this is a Democratic primary that de Blasio has to get through. Is Soros a big enough name that it rings a bell for liberals and Democrats that it actually helps him? Or does it only help him if there's money behind this?
It's not a name, it's the money, it's the wallet. Today there's published reports about the Soros family money being the biggest money to try to change campaign finance in New York State. They were the biggest donors statewide. They take that same mentality down to New York City right now. Who knows what they can do?
Yes, Soros also has a vast network of organizations that he funds. Mm-hmm. Those will no doubt kick in to help de Blasio. He's somebody that I think as escape notice pretty much in this race. He could squeeze in there still and take that spot that Thompson has.
But here's why I ask, because 2012, 2008, you hear Soros liberal, anything that Soros touches is uber liberal, especially on Fox News. Does that ring a bell for Democrats and for liberals in New York City, equating de Blasio to, well, he's the progressive here?
You know, my feeling is that it helps him a lot in the primary, actually, in the Democratic primary, because you need to run to the left, and you've got a lot of liberals vying for this position. And so I think it does help de Blasio a little bit. I think it helps more the money in the organization rather than the name. I'm not so certain that endorsements generally, unless it's a huge endorsement like the president or something, really, really helps with the average voter. But in a primary that's this tight, it could help de Blasio, but particularly the money, I think, in the organization.
And the stature boost, I think.
Yeah.
I'm of the belief, as the professor, that endorsements mean basically little. It's more the money question. I don't think Soros' endorsement is going to mean much with the average New York City voter.
What about in the general? Does it help Republicans in the general? Because Soros is such a boogeyman to the right?
It's a boogeyman, but also, if you didn't know that Bill de Blasio was the most liberal candidate in the Democratic primary, now you do.
Right.
I mean, that's what I've been saying all along, and that liberal base does show up. But at
Does
the end of the day,
does that hurt him if he's the most liberal candidate?
Not in a 7-to-1 city.
Not in the primary.
Not in the general either. Yeah.
I think in the general, though, they want to see mainstream. I mean, there's going to be a more of a move to the center for the general than there is in the primary.
Yeah.
You know, in the Turner race, when we were doing that with Koch, 65% of the voters said they would move because of Koch's endorsement. But that was a big one. This is not anywhere near.
Right, by the way, 632. You mentioned Bob Turner. Go on.
But I think in the. For if Joe Lhota or John Catsimatidis, whichever one is the candidate, the best chance they have, other than Weiner, I think would be Bill de Blasio, because he's so far to the left. But I don't think Soros does anything to hurt him, especially.
You know what, Bill? Speaking of Joe Lhota, he said, looking at the camera, up next, is this the race for 2013, or is it really the race for 2009, or is it all about 1997? Here's what we mean. Joe Lhota served in the Giuliani administration and is often associated with Rudy. So much so that former Governor David Paterson recently called Lhota a, quote, cheap carbon copy of Rudy Giuliani. Additionally, the former Giuliani aides, or 3 former Giuliani aides, are now forming a super PAC to raise money for Lhota. So money-wise, it's Rudy too, said one donor. Meanwhile, Christine Quinn, closely associated with Mayor Bloomberg because of her role enabling a 3rd term for Bloomberg, is the mayoral race essentially a referendum on the Bloomberg and Giuliani legacies? And let me start with Joe Lhota. If I say, or if somebody describes Joe Lhota as following in the footsteps of Rudy Giuliani, would the Lhota campaign be all right with that?
I think certainly in the primary. I mean, I think certainly, he's got a great long record with Rudy Giuliani. He ran the city for Rudy, with Rudy. I think that just shows competency. I mean,
he's using Rudy in the mail pieces. I mean, living in New York City, getting the
no
mail.
doubt about it.
He's in the mail pieces all the time.
And while Giuliani hasn't endorsed him yet, he has said in interviews, I'll basically do whatever I can to help him.
He's all but
Rudy's
with them.
They've done fundraisers in Staten Island with him and Grimm. He's out there. He's campaigning with them. Sure.
So then, is Joe Lhota's campaign at all a referendum on Rudy Giuliani, not just the September 11th and September 12th Rudy Giuliani, but also the September 10th Rudy Giuliani, who was not that popular?
I would actually go back to the 89 concept. We've had the conversation before, the Dinkins-Rudy election. So when you look back what happened 89 to 93 and so forth, really what you look at is going forward. And it's Bloomberg talked about this a bit today. Do you want to go back to pre-Rudy days and what's happened to the city and where it was back then with crime and unemployment where it was? And the blight that was going on up in northern Manhattan and the outer boroughs? Or do you want to go forward and build upon what Rudy did, build upon what Bloomberg did, And Joe can learn the good and the bad from all those experiences over the past 20 years.
I think when you ask each of the candidates, what have you done? What do you bring to the table as a mayoral candidate? Joe Lhota can say, I can run this city. I've done it without the title.
Well,
that's
he
a pretty big
did
qualification.
say that when we interviewed him. One, if Governor Patterson wants the Democrats to win, he may want to be quiet because it's not for him to attack someone. He's not really exactly the guy that should be out there doing the speaking for Democrats.
Fair
He
point.
wants to run for Congress.
It doesn't matter
And
what
this
he
is a
wants.
chance-
Yeah.
this is
And
a
I want $1
chance-
billion, but I'm not going to get
Dominic,
it.
you put
George
him
Soros
up,
is not
you put him up in
helping.
Rangel's district. You put him in Rangel's district.
Yeah, he'd
this
win,
is the
but-
message that helps him, and
Okay,
he wants to run.
He's
for
let's-
mad
the-
about MTA.
But let me
stuff.
keep it on Lhota and Giuliani in that relationship. Would you offer words of caution about putting on a Giuliani cloak?
When I asked Lhota that question, he says to the Democrats that may raise it, his exact words were, bring it. Now, if you're the Democrat running against Lhota, the plus is he could say, I ran the city for Rudy Giuliani, 9/11, blah, 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 blah. The negative is the Democrats are going to say, what about Amadou Diallo? What about the police community relations? And so on. It will be a referendum on Giuliani come if I'm Lhota, I want to take that gamble.
The reality. Okay.
Well, no, I absolutely agree with Dominic. You want to take that gamble, particularly in the primary. When you get to the general, you should move away a little bit,
You
you
can
know.
pivot, yeah.
But that's pretty standard stuff.
Got to move on. And I got to get to John Liu and the question of whether he's been handed a campaign death sentence. The New York City Comptroller has been blocked from getting matching funds in his mayoral race that would have totaled more than $3.5 million. The campaign's lawyer said the Campaign Finance Board's decision was like the death penalty for minor transgressions. Liu's rivals, including Christine Quinn, Bill de Blasio, Anthony Weiner, and Bill Thompson, they will all get matching funds. How does this work? And is there a chance that he could still get these funds later on? You guys are campaigning, not in this campaign, but you work on plenty of campaigns.
Probably not. This is going to hurt him pretty badly. First of all, I'd forgotten that John Liu was a candidate. Well, John Liu has been irrelevant in this race. Go ahead.
Well, I was down there, Campaign Finance Board yesterday, following what's going on here a bit, and I think the reality is that the campaign has known for months this was going to happen. There are emails back and forth between the attorney and so forth, and the question may be, well, why did they have this hearing? Why did they go to executive session yesterday, and different things? And was it all just color for it, window dressing? It very well could have been. But his attorney had a chance to make a public comment on it. They had a chance to listen to the attorney again. But the emails back and forth between the campaign and CFB were very colorful. I mean, BS this, and I mean, just a lot of different calling names back and forth that is really an indication the campaign knew where this was going. Can he appeal it? Yes, he is. And he won't find out till days before the election. There'll be no chance to buy media at that point, from what I can see.
And that's why he's pretty much dead in the water. Listen, he's in the single digits. As Bill mentioned, who even knew he was still in this race? I question why the campaign on June 10th or before this, after the convictions of his campaign, fundraiser, chief fundraiser, why they went for matching funds in the first place. I disagree with that decision completely.
But the answer is very simple.
They needed the money.
He needs the money, number one.
But you weren't going to get it. Every expert who looked at this said there was no way they were going to get this money. Now you've opened the guy up to renewed questions about his integrity, his honesty, and you know what?
But he's running to rehabilitate himself. So had he gotten $1 million instead of $3 million, that would have been. In other words, the campaign's case was take out every single thing you think is in question, put that aside. But if you look at certain people that have donated over the time and built up that number, you could have. I mean, Quinn got more than $3 million, and the other people got $1 million and change.
Everybody who looked at this after the conviction said he's not going to get through the CFB. Right. He's not going to get the money. He should have gone. He should have gone and said, "Listen, I'm not going to take public funds. I'm going to do this on my own."
But I think this is an indication the CFB's got bigger problems in my mind. How do you justify Christine Quinn and Anthony Weiner getting money because they collected money 5 years ago for the last race? That shouldn't be anything for matching funds either.
For the public to follow us, it's 6-to-1 matching funds. For every dollar that you raise,
up to $175.
You get $6. I'm not comfortable with the Campaign Finance Board declaring who was a viable candidate and who was not.
Bingo.
Because they ended John Liu's campaign. Period. End of story.
But I've seen them do that in other campaigns where, they materially change the way campaigns run. If, for example, you want to front load your advertising in a campaign and the Campaign Finance Board finds problems with you or decides they have problems with you, you can't do that. They'll hold your cash off to the very end of the campaign. If you're trying to buy when not everyone else is on the air, you're done. Or they just can arbitrarily say you got fines, you're being held up.
Also, Christine Quinn from 5 years ago has collected now matching funds from men and women who now are appointees of hers in the city. This is totally a
But
corrupt
these are the
system to
rules that
begin
are in
with.
place.
And let's not forget, this is being held up as the model for New York State. And I think there are big questions
huge
there
holes in it.
as to whether, in fact, it works. Is John Liu going to even be in the debate since the CFB runs those? And his campaign is raising questions about the executive session, which we talked about off air, and also about the fact they're claiming there were not Chinese cards that went out there, cards in Chinese.
And you know what their answer was?
And
Their answer was
the CFB
anybody
didn't
can
answer.
translate anything
Yeah,
they want,
which
any
is
language.
absolutely
and they
ridiculous.
have such scrutiny over everything published. I find that
It's
very
not
hard
right.
to believe.
It's not right.
Quick fact question just from the campaign, guys. If he surprises us, John Liu, and let's say gets 15% of the vote in the primary, does that change this with the matching funds because he's clearly more viable than they thought he was?
No.
Or is it
It's not a
totally their
viability.
discretion?
I think it opens up a whole other conversation, but it's totally at their discretion.
Okay. All right.
And the only way it would help him then is if he reaches his own pocket or takes a loan out and spends $1 million and goes back and says, now give me the $1 million back or I'm going to sue you or whatever.
Because they don't look at viability. Campaign gals can answer too. They don't look at viability. They only look at violations of the act, which they claim they found.
And even if he sues, it'll still be too
It's too
late.
late.
He won't
He's
be the
done now.
nominee. The Campaign Finance Board effectively ended his campaign
Right, he
for
needs to
mayor.
put those buys in now
You know,
for television.
It's funny, we keep talking about who's going to win. It's going to be curious to see who comes in dead last in
But
the
Don, I mean,
primary, too.
we found out just
Andrew,
now,
follow
yeah.
this through for a second. Campaign Finance Board makes candidates declare in early June if you're part of the system. The petition process hasn't started and finished until the beginning of July. Therefore, somebody like Stringer had to say he's in the system before Spitzer got in the system, so he wouldn't even know what he was going to do on that for spending caps. Then he has to go back to them and say, can you please give me more money to spend? Can you please allow me to spend more money? They have complete and utter control, like Bill
Absolutely,
says,
yeah.
over campaign decisions. It's ridiculous.
All right, we're going to take a break. We're going to shift from city politics to national politics. Up next is the GOP splitting at the seams. Is there a growing division between Tea Party Republicans and moderate Republicans? On the other hand, our panel is going to sound off on that when we come back.